Hello and welcome to the day ahead on this Friday, May the 8th. I'm Nadine Blaney. We'll say goodbye to yesterday's gains and then some on the local market, with the S&P ASX futures pointing to a drop of 1.7% at the open. It was a 1-2 punch for investors in the U.S. with uncertainty over the U.S.-Iran peace talks and a pullback in chip stocks, leading U.S. indices lower after resetting record highs. The Dow dropped by 0.63%, the S&P by 0.4%, and the Nasdaq a more muted 0.1%. Chip supply worries sent shares of ARM Holdings tumbling. Intel and Advanced Micro Devices also gave back some of their previous gains this week. In earnings, Snap shares fell. The company's blaming an ad revenue hit on the Mideast conflict and slowing in North America. Cybersecurity firm Fortinet shares soared after hiking its annual forecast. McDonald's shares did end slightly lower after a Q1 revenue and profit beat. Meanwhile, troubled private credit fund Blue Owl Capital slipped after a dividend cut. But Tesla shares rose after it sold more cars in China. Chevron, Exxon, Occidental Petroleum, all of those energy shares were hit as crude fell in a very volatile session. But gold miners, including Newmont, well, it was a bit of a mixed picture as bullion hit a 2-week high. In economic news, the number of Americans filing jobless claims rose moderately last week, with the market trimming expectations for interest rate cuts this year. It comes ahead, of course, of the non-farm payroll report tonight. And as the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland President Beth Hammack said, she expects central banks to hold interest rates steady well into the future as it navigates a climate of considerable uncertainty. Meanwhile, Fed Reserve Bank of New York President John Williams also spoke, saying demand for U.S. government debt remains robust, despite high levels of borrowing calling demand enormous. The U.S. 10-year increased to 4.39%, and the U.S. dollar strengthened as the Middle East conflict kept investors on edge. The Aussie is buying 72.1 U.S. this morning. Well, profit-taking pushed Bitcoin nearly 4% lower in U.S. trade, bringing it back toward the 79,500 level. That's after reaching levels not seen in almost 3 months. Bitcoin gained 12% in April alone. On again, off again, peace talks in the Middle East put pressure on oil. They swung between gains and losses after reports said that Saudi Arabia and Kuwait lifted restrictions on the use of its airspace and military bases, which could allow the U.S. to restart operations to escort commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz as early as this week. Brent crude futures settled down 1.2%, or $1.21 at $106 a barrel. Gold extended its gains. Spot gold was up 0.3% at $4,700 per ounce. Copper held steady, and iron ore rose for the 4th day on solid demand. It's pretty quiet on the data docket locally after that interest rate hike that came through on Tuesday. But we do get results from Macquarie Group, QBE Insurance, News Corp, RE Group, and Block. That does it for the day ahead for today and this week. I'm Nadine Blaney. We'll see you next week.